Hey everyone, welcome to the 332nd episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And my goodness, Kevin, we've been doing this for 6 years.
Ouch.
Sorry.
No, wait, it has to be longer than that.
Well, yeah, but not in this iteration. Remember, we had the earlier iteration?
Oh, this is version 2.0. That's right.
This is new and improved. That was the alpha. This is the beta. One day it'll be GA. Okay, jokes aside, we have an awesome show for you this week. We're going to be talking about a good idea in IoT and a bad idea. Plus, smart home device maker Wyze just got a ton of money. We've got Home Assistant getting energy management capabilities that are pretty cool and a trend in the industry. IKEA has a new device. We'll see if you want it. Philips is going to make brighter bulbs, and I say it is about time. And we didn't talk about this last week, but I thought it was pretty cool. So we're going to talk about Google's industrial robotics software division. And Kevin has done a comp on smart cities and is a little sad at where the U.S. ranks.
Well, it's sad if you live in the U.S.
Well, yes, and we do.
The other countries are laughing right now at us.
And our guest this week is going to be Sean Cooley, who is the CEO of Mapped. And we're talking about smart buildings, basically, and the software infrastructure that it's going to take to make those a reality. We'll also hear from our sponsor, Very, talking about their podcast. And we're also going to hear from our sponsor, Very, right now. Are you looking for an IoT development firm that has been there and done that? Very has an award-winning team of engineers, designers, and even data scientists who are going to work with you to get your biggest IoT hardware and software products fully operational. If you want, learn more at www.verypossible.com. Okay, Kevin, let's talk about a good idea in IoT.
I don't know if you remember, I have an actual Google Doc with all these good ideas I've had over the last 10 years, and many of them are IoT. I actually tried to build what we're going to talk about with Legos, and it's on the list of things I started but never finished.
So yes, you thought it was a good idea all the way back when you were playing around with Lego Mindstorms.
Yes, that is correct.
Which wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, well, don't out me. Then next you're going to tell everybody I play Minecraft too. So this idea resurfaced through the Designing Interactive Systems conference 2 months ago with a paper. And the paper has to do with something that the authors are calling IoTizer, a versatile mechanical hijacking device for creating Internet of Old Things. And that sounds like almost scary, mechanical hijacking, but here's the concept. What if you could build, and you can with either Legos or 3D printers or whatnot, basically a little, call it a finger. You need a circuit board, you'd need some connectivity, you'd need a servo, and just a finger to either press a button or flip a switch on a non-smart device. A perfect example would be the air purifier that I bought that wasn't a smart device, and even adding a smart plug didn't work because you still needed to press the power button on the device itself. This IoTizer concept could take the place of me actually pressing this. So I love this idea. And I mean, there's concept videos with coffee makers. I could do this with my coffee maker because that's not smart either.
My coffee maker, I wanted to make it smart, but it required a physical button press, and it actually required a lot of strength. So, yeah.
Oh, well, you could get a big servo.
I was going to say a bigger servo would do it. But this is designed to work with anything that can be pushed, pulled, or twisted. And this isn't something you could buy, unfortunately.
No. But you could make one.
You could make one. And
I should try. Oh, wait.
I think that's on your list. But yeah, so we pulled this from IEEE Spectrum. The writer of this piece said it probably cost about $100 to make one of those, although it could be less if you did it in volume. And it points out that you could build it, but you're going to need a Pi, you're going to need radio frequency, some coding, and a servo, and something to hit the button. Again, same thing. I wish there were an Instructables for this, but there isn't yet. But there is a research paper, and you can check it out if you'd like.
Yeah, I think anybody who has any experience with the little, maybe an Arduino or a Pi, a little bit of coding experience, you don't have to have a ton here to make a servo, make something move up and down, left and right, and so on. I mean, if you want to get fancy, like they have a concept for it, using it with a TV remote control that remembers individuals' different preferred channels. Okay, that's a little more technical, yes. But if you just want to flip a switch, turn a lock, press a button, I think it's a relatively simple project. Obviously, since, the Legos worked out so well for me.
There you go. So that's a good idea. Keeping your old devices and turning them smart. Yay.
Less e-waste.
Less e-waste. Now, let's talk about a bad idea.
Speaking of e-waste.
I mean, it could be worse. So Amazon has introduced a smart soap dispenser. And you know what? Part of this device, which cost $54.99, is a good idea. So this device, we'll tell you a little bit about it, is simply a liquid soap dispenser. It has a light on the top that will light up while you're washing your hands for 20 seconds. It has a sensor that detects how far away your hand is from the dispensing nozzle. And it will, if you put your hand lower, it dispenses more. If you put it higher, it dispenses less. So that governs the amount of soap dispensed.
Had they stopped there,
this would be really good. It would be a wonderful example of one of my favorite things, which is adding intelligence to devices without adding connectivity where it's not needed. And I think that's a trend that hopefully we'll see more of. But they didn't stop there. Instead, they added a Wi-Fi chip. And the Wi-Fi chip lets this thing tie into an Amazon Echo device that's in the room, specifically a speaker. And when you dispense the soap, it'll play songs for you. You can basically set up a routine and have it do that. And here,
why?
Yeah. So a couple issues here. Oh, and one of the other good things they did, they put a rechargeable battery in here.
Yes.
And because at first I was like, this battery is supposed to last 3 months. That is a lot of e-waste. It's a lot of batteries going in a landfill. So the fact that it's rechargeable makes me a little bit happier. But this is a device that they're like, yeah, we're going to warranty it for a year. I don't think we need to have a battery, a Wi-Fi chip, and all of these sensors for a soap dispenser for a year.
If you don't use the routines, I see absolutely no benefit or reason to have the Wi-Fi in there.
Right.
Because there's no speaker and there's no mic with it. Call it an edge or trigger device to fire off a routine that you set up on your existing Madame A device.
Now, you could do some crazy things. You could actually combine our good idea. So if you had a smart flusher on your toilet, when the toilet flushes, you could actually create a routine where the soap dispenser, if it doesn't get triggered, it would warn people. It would be like, oh my God, they didn't wash their hands.
Yeah.
But for a very few number of people, I can see what if you had a routine where you're trying to get your kids to wash their hands after they go to the bathroom? So you could build I'm going to do it, Kevin, a baby shark routine. So when they're washing their hands, they hear baby shark, doo, 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 doo. I know everyone hates me.
I am not responsible for the song she just put in your heads.
But kids love that thing and they would wash their hands just to hear it. So that might be good. But still, putting a Wi-Fi chip on something like this makes it, there's no point. It makes it more expensive. It uses batteries faster. It sticks more e-waste in the form of a chip in there. It could possibly become a security risk. I don't know why they did this.
I don't think this was really well thought out, personally. I mean, will people buy it? Sure. There's a product for everybody. There's a customer for every product. But to spend the time and effort to offer this, to engineer it, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's so little benefit, so little value add.
With the Wi-Fi connection, if it tied into a warning you're almost out of soap kind of thing or replenishment.
Fulfillment from soap. Yes.
But
it seems like it's gimmicky. What they're using the Wi-Fi for.
Yeah, and we don't need a Wi-Fi chip in this. If you wanted, for some reason, Amazon to build a better soap dispenser to experiment with cool use of sensors without connectivity, great. But otherwise, So that's
we say thought. Thumbs down.
This is a silly idea. It is silly. And this is someone I actually have automatic soap dispenser. So I would be in the target market for this if it weren't so expensive and so silly.
Yeah, what we said, $55?
It's $55. Although the Simple Human soap dispenser is like around that price. But
well, Simple Human is a
it's
high-end
fancy
brand. Yeah, it's fancy. Yeah, so, okay, and that's your choice.
Right. I don't have that one, by the way. Mine cost $15. It did break after a year, though. Okay. Kevin's like, wait, is that the one you told me to buy? It was before I knew it broke. Okay.
That's fine. That's fine. Is there a new Wise product to talk about?
Yes, there is. Actually, no, there's not.
No.
I was like, yes, no. But there is Wise news. Wise has raised $110 million for its AI push. And this is from GeekWire, who learned this last week. But Wise is going to use the money to basically invest more in AI. And I assume subscriptions. This brings Wise's total funding to $146 million. They're pulling out products all the time.
They sort of have to do this because of what happened with their AI implementation that disappeared in a sense because Apple purchased the AI company or the IP.
Exynos, yeah.
Yeah, Exynos. So we lost a lot of features that were using the AI, and that was on-device AI, if I recall correctly.
It was on-device AI because Exynos made software to make visual image processing more efficient.
And it worked really well, which obviously that's a good reason for somebody to purchase them. But it left Wise out in the cold with their AI features. And they've been working hard since then to reintegrate different AI features. It's been taking a while, and the features are not quite as good. They're a little more limited. So I'm surprised they're getting this much money. I mean, I'm not a financial guy, but I mean, this really bulks up how much funding they've raised because you said it was a total of 146 million so far.
Mm-hmm.
And 110 just came in.
Yeah, well, so they've launched, in some ways, they've proven that they can launch products. Their model is to find the hardware somewhere else. So a lot of their hardware is repurposed Chinese hardware. And some of it they do design themselves, but some of it is just repurposed, rebranded. And then the software is where they're trying to make their waves. Interestingly, people have been getting more frustrated about the software because they've got so many products and they're like, hey, could you please update this thing like you said you would? So this funding might go into buying more engineers to kind of take on that.
Yeah, they're good with the camera updates, but everything else seems much slower in terms of the cadence.
Yeah, I would go 100% with that. Okay, so that's good news for Wise. And in really random news, I got to say, IKEA is one of my favorite companies to watch on the smart home front because they just come at it, they do it different. They come at it sideways. So IKEA has announced a new Starkwind coffee table. This is not just a little coffee table or a side table. They are also floor stand air purifiers. And I love this idea. So the small one is priced at $129 and the coffee table version is $189. They're going to be available in IKEA stores, unfortunately, right after wildfire season ends in October. But hey, that's okay. It feels like a way more European design. So it's only capable for about 215 feet. So this is not going to purify like a big room.
Yeah, it's going to be a single room air purifier. And at that price, I think you should expect that, having researched and purchased some air purifiers. But, if you have a closed off room that, make a study or your kitchen, whatever it might be, I wouldn't put this in a big living room personally. And you need a side table. It's handy. And I mean, based on the specs, it sounds like a reasonably good purifier. It has 5 different fan speed modes, automatic mode, based on the amount of PM 2.5 particles detected in the air. And we know those sensors, are not inexpensive. I recently looked at them myself to build something that I'll probably never build. And I mean, the cheapest I could find for like a laser PM 2.5 particle detector was $35. And the design is typical IKEA. As you said, it's a European-looking side table or coffee. Yeah, I'd say side table, not coffee table, but because it's, I don't know, maybe 18 inches round. I'm taking a guess.
It's a side table. Well, they have a coffee table version too.
And in typical IKEA fashion for their smart products, this is not a I don't want to call it a single purpose kind of thing. They're integrating the filter or the purifier rather into the table. So it's a functional piece of furniture in more than one way, right? Like they do with their picture frame speakers or their bookshelf speakers, which can hold books and hold the books up. It's just not just a purifier. It's a piece of furniture that has smarts.
Yes. And I said earlier that there was a coffee table version. It's actually more like a freestanding version. So that's the $189. So that's also an option. Now, it will be able to be connected to the Trarfri gateway, the one that we do for lighting. And eventually it will be HomeKit compatible according to IKEA. So, yay! That will be exciting. And I like it. I mean, I like the integration of, as someone who I have 4 air purifiers in my home and smoke is already coming to my house.
Not good.
So I'm like, I hate taking up the floor space. Sure. Would I buy this? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, my purifiers are standalone units, and they do take up space, and I have to pick them up and move them when I'm having the Roomba sweep or whatever, because I want to make sure I get around everything. So, yeah.
It also is kind of dystopian, though. It's like, you will always need an air purifier.
That's another issue entirely. Normally I'm pretty happy when I hear that HomeKit is going to be supported in something, but I honestly don't care. This can automatically detect when it should be on, so I don't need that. If it's good at that, then I don't even want it on my HomeKit stuff.
Yeah, maybe you want it like when you're out to really, or for part of like a bedtime routine or something. I don't know. You're right. Sure. Okay. Other products. Philips Hue now has a brighter bulb. Yay!
Well, brighter than the dimmer bulb.
Now they have 3 levels of brightness in some of their bulbs. So the traditional Hue white and color lights were like 806 lumens. They were a little dim, I'll be honest. Then they launched a 1600 lumen Bluetooth tunable white bulb.
No colors.
No colors. And I actually have that bulb in my living room because it's a giant cavernous space and there are no overhead lights at all. So all of my light bulbs need to be like super awesome. And it is super awesome. It is a very bright light, but it is only white. Now they're coming out with color and white lights that are going to be 1100 lumens. So right in the middle of the road. It's not going to replace the 800 lumen LEDs. It's just going to be a new alternative. It's going to cost about $10 more for the colored version of the 1100 lumen lamps. And they're not out yet, but they're coming out, quote unquote, soon.
And I mean, I don't think $10 is terrible to ask, a $10 premium, because you're getting almost 40% more brightness and you're keeping your colors.
Yeah. And I mean, that was the real bummer on the colored lights is they were super pretty, but they were, when they were their white setting, they were pretty dim. So in living in Seattle, I really appreciate that now that I need brighter light bulbs everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. So I might check these out, but then what do I do with my old light bulbs?
That's always a problem. I actually have a box of older smart bulbs in the garage that I want to donate to somebody, but some of them might need a bridge and everything else. I don't know. When you find the answer to that, let me know.
All right. Who's doing light bulb recycling? Let us know. That's it from Philips Hue. Let's talk about Home Assistant and their new energy monitoring update. Ooh. This week, they announced Home Assistant 2021.8. Yay. And the plan is for this one, the big feature is home energy management. And the goal is to let devices that are connected to your Home Assistant stuff start tracking their energy use. And then eventually they'll have an energy dashboard. And yeah, the idea is that you can both see how your home is using energy. And then maybe it will also, if these are available to you, let you see how much you're powering from like solar or renewables, if you can get that via your utility company. I think it's pretty cool. And it's part of an ongoing trend as there's 2 things driving it. One is people are freaking out finally about climate change. And 2 is countries and municipalities are really coming down hard on electrification and energy use. And we've had a couple shows about this where we've talked about we've got more demands for electricity in our home that we're going to have to manage on a limited amp setting. So
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if you caught this news because it's more of the gaming scene, PC gaming. But in California, with their new rules, regulations, whatever you call them, certain brand new gaming PCs actually are not allowed to be used because of the power draw.
wow.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes. And I'm not saying that's going to happen for all of us, but it's something to consider that could happen. And ironically, do you know why I bought my very first smart plug?
To track energy consumption?
Good guess. Yes, exactly. And it worked well, but it only worked for obviously the one device that was plugged into it. And it wasn't integrated into any dashboard, like a holistic overview of all of my energy usage in the home. And granted, we've seen products that can be inserted into your electrical panel and figure that out. But now I'm starting to see less of a need for those because as we add more and more smart devices, eventually if everything becomes smart and we can get the energy data in a single dashboard, you won't need anything in the electrical panel anymore. Those products, unfortunately, would be sort of obsoleted.
So I think the smarter energy, like in the circuit breaker panels, are going to be more important because I think those are going to be actually governing devices. So instead of you individually managing your smart home energy consumption, I think these things are going to be able to track it, analyze it, and anticipate when to shunt energy to different devices in your home. So I think there's a role for a smarter layer for managing energy consumption in the home as we start plugging more things in, because we are going to be limited in terms of what's available to us.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I don't know that I want utilities or government telling me what I can use when.
So they don't have to. You could actually set up your own parameters. And I don't necessarily want this either, but I actually think that might be where we're going. So if you look at what would be worse for you, let's ask it this way. Having your electricity go out because the grid is overwhelmed. So having everybody's electricity go out for however long that takes, or having the government say, we don't have enough electricity right now. Could everybody stop doing this? And with a service like a smarter electrical panel, you might be able to set parameters like the government just says, hey, I need every home in the neighborhood to reduce their energy consumption by 10%.
Stop doing laundry.
And then you could have an app that says, if that happens, what are the devices that you want to shut off? So you would get to choose the devices, but I don't know if we're going to be in a future where we get to choose whether or not we want to reduce our consumption.
That would be interesting. That I could live with as long as I had some control in a situation like that. I'll be honest, and I didn't even tell you this, but since we're talking about the energy, for the past 2 weeks, I've actually been using a portable power bank. That's maybe a 400 watt, 52 watt hour battery that I can recharge from the grid. But I bought a rather inexpensive 100 watt foldable solar panel. I charge the battery every morning and maybe again if I need to top it off in the afternoon on sunny days. And all I'm doing with it is literally charging iPad and all of my laptops and Chromebooks for now, because that's really all I can do. I can't run a high wattage appliance off it, but I actually have a bigger battery coming today, and I'll do the same approach with that, where I could use higher wattage appliances for a short time, but still, I've been thinking about how I want to use energy and how I want to manage it. So I'm very much into all of this. I think it's great for Home Assistant to adopt this.
So which battery did you get?
Well, I have an old battery from Suwaki that I'm using now because I had it, but I ordered one that was a Kickstarter maybe a year or two ago, but it's available on Amazon and direct. It's the EcoFlow Power Station River, 288 watt hour backup lithium battery. Mine is not lithium ion. I don't believe the one I have might be an older lead acid or something. And it outputs up to 600 watts, but they have some kind of funky algorithm where they can reduce either the voltage or the amperage and power some devices up to 1800 watts for a very short time. And that's perfect for maybe my sump pump, maybe my Keurig, which is 1500 watts, got to have the coffee, and a bunch of other things. It's in a worst case situation that may work for me. And another reason I got it is because they make a second battery pack that you can attach to this one, and it's very thin because all the battery control modules and all the electronics are already in the main device. So there's an add-on battery that doubles your capacity, and it just kind of stacks onto it and still makes it carryable, portable, etc.
Nice. Yeah. Heading into the winter when we tend to lose power. And when we lose power, we tend to lose it for a full day. So it is kind of a pain. We treat our car, because we've got a Tesla, as an extended battery for charging devices. But I have been thinking about like the Yetis or the big batteries, not
Generacs and Jackaroos.
I don't want to do a full generator just because it's really expensive and or messy. I don't want to have like a gas can to worry about. I don't know. This is a tough issue. So
I would like to see Tesla do what Ford has done with their electric truck and allow your Tesla battery to power your house for a certain amount of time, because with the truck you can do that.
Oh, very cool. I didn't realize
you
that.
already have a big battery in your garage. Why not use that energy when you're not going anywhere and can't go anywhere to power your house in case of emergency?
Yeah, that would be really interesting, huh?
They just want to sell you a power wall.
Yeah, well, that's fair, I guess. Anyway, go capitalism. All right, and that's most of the smart home news we have. I also wanted to talk about this story that we didn't get to last week, and I was sad about it, which is Alphabet, the company behind Google, or the parent company of Google, has launched one of their moonshots, or one of their X-team companies. They have created a company called Intrinsic. And the goal of Intrinsic is to provide software for industrial robots. This obviously matters for my IoT audience. I'm going to try to talk to somebody from Intrinsic just because I think it's really fascinating. But the idea is, every robot that you have out there, it's custom designed. The software is custom built for that particular robot. It's very bespoke, and that raises the price of these things. It limits their kind of utility a little bit. And this would make them a little bit more flexible. So that's the goal. They're going to be also doing a lot with like robot learning and sensing. And yeah.
I like this partly because of the reasons you just said. I mean, there are tons of robots in industrial. Perfect example would be your assembly line or whatever. And one robot does, maybe one thing. It does it really, really well, can do it really, really fast with perfect precision. But if it only does that one thing, that's kind of limiting. And with Intrinsic, like in this article that you found, they're showing how 4 robots kind of work together. They get synchronized to build like wooden pods for sustainable architecture. So each one is a different part of the piece of the pod, but yet they can be synchronized to work together and create or combine those 4 pieces into one thing. And they can obviously do more because you can program them to do different things. So I love, love, love this idea.
Okay. And finally, let's talk about this report from Smart Cities that you wrote about.
Yeah, the IMD Business School, which I had not heard of or seen under their publications, they're publishing an annual Smart Cities Index. They started in 2019, and then I found the 2020 edition. It's too early for 2021 yet. It's interesting. They literally rank hundreds of cities of which are the quote unquote top smart cities. And I was just surprised. This is my US centric view, of course, that there was only one US city in the top 10, and in the top 50, there was like 12. So, and San Francisco, which I would have figured to be up there, actually dropped from 2019 to 2020 from 12th to 27th. So it was all Europe and Southeast Asia. And I was just wondering why that might be. And I came up with a couple of ideas. I mean, the quick summary, you said it to me right before the show. It's geography, the density of cities in Europe and so on makes it a lot easier than in the US to do these types of things, without a doubt. But
yes, they have cheaper connectivity, because you really hit on the fact that here connectivity is really expensive. In Europe, there's full coverage for alternative networks like Sixbox or LoRa networks. And then also, there's a lot of funding in Europe for smart cities efforts.
yes.
And in the Middle East and Asia.
Which is for infrastructure in general.
Yes. So maybe we'll get there with the latest infrastructure bill. Maybe not, but it is something to hope for. Okay. That's the newsy portion of the show, but now it is time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline, the part of the show where we take questions from you, our listeners. This week's IoT podcast hotline is sponsored by Silicon Labs and their Works With event. This is an event that's going to take place September 14th through 15th. It is all virtual, and it is the only event that is going to bring the entirety of the IoT together. Works With will let you learn about IoT trends, training, market discussions on everything from smart home to industrial IoT. I will be there. I will be virtually there, and you can register for free at workswith.scilabs.com. And it is the beginning of August, which means we're drawing a winner for our smart home grab bag. Woo! So exciting. And this month's winner is Dean from the Twin Cities. And Dean, I feel like you have called us on a couple occasions, asking us questions. So I am excited that this time, you are a winner, and you will get a smart doorbell, a smart light plug, and a smart dryer timer thingy.
No smart soap dispenser. Sorry, Dean.
Sorry. Although, if you're into that, we could make that a prize for some other month. It also means that August, we have a new prize. I'm thinking smart speaker, but I may come out from that. But if you would like to be entered to win whatever August prize is going to be, you can give us a call at 512-623-7424 and leave us your question, and we would love to answer it, and you will also be entered to win. This week's question is a voicemail from Brent on how to name devices.
Hello, this is Brent from Roy. I have a question about how I should be naming items in my house. It seems like every time I try to get clever with the name, the Google and the Amazon device, they just don't learn the name, and it seems like they're guessing or have to try to understand it every single time. I was looking for unique names for my lights, so I named one of them Mushroom. And when I want that turned on or off, it seems like at least half the time my Google Assistant just does not understand the name. So is there a good convention for how I should name the many individual lights that are in my house? Thank you.
Oh, Brent.
Don't be cute, Brent.
I have been there. I have named cute device names, and then A, no one knows what they're called, and B, it's confusing for my devices. They're not good with certain things. So broad rules. I would say go with multiple syllables. 2 to 3 syllables is the right amount of syllables for a digital assistant. 1-syllable words can be really tough for them to understand. It's like dogs. 2, use names that work. So there's 2 series of thoughts here. 1, you could name everything like bulb 1 living room, bulb 2 living room. And then I'm assuming these are in your living room. And then you would also group them together under living room. But as an added bonus, when you just say turn on living room lights, any light that has living room is going to turn on. And you wouldn't even have to group them. Or you can create a group.
That gives you flexibility to turn on an individual light. And I used to use numbers like that, but I stopped. Now,
oh, well, wait. So that's for people who don't want to turn on individual lights. That's just for people who are like, I just want all the lights in this room to turn on.
Oh, okay.
If you wanted to turn on individual lights, I get cute, but I don't get like mushroom cute. I get cute like I either describe the lamp or light itself, or I describe what it's going to light up. So I have over my dining room table, I have the table lamp. I have, because I don't have any overhead lights in my house because it's old. I have a $500 lamp from Room and Board. I know, y'all. It's so pretty though. Anyway, that is called the fancy lamp because it is fancy. Possibly I should have called it the sofa lamp because it lights up the sofa, but I didn't. That's how you should start thinking about doing your naming, because then it makes it easy for people to come in and turn things on, and it is not super cutesy.
Bingo. It's intuitive and descriptive, and that's the way I ended up going after multiple different iterations. I say salt lamp for my salt lamp and TV lamp for the lamp next to the TV and so on.
The challenge of this is when I move fancy lamp out of the living room, I'm going to have to create a new routine, depending, like when I turn the living room on and off, right? So I'm going to have to do that. I have a freestanding lamp in my study that is called, ready? Study lamp.
I have one too.
So if I moved study lamp into, or the bulb inside study lamp into the living room, that means I have to go in and rename everything and create new routines. It's a pain. So if you're planning on moving things around a lot, I would do descriptions of the lamp, maybe?
I mean, I don't do a lot of routines, so I'm probably, again, in the minority. We've had this chat before. But just for me to move things, it's just a rename of the bulb and then adding it to moving it from one group to another for the most part. That's just simple.
Got it. Yes. And so that's what I would recommend for you. And, you might also want to create an upstairs or downstairs routine, or if you want to group, and that's actually not a routine, that's just a grouping. So I'm hoping that helps you somewhat in your journey. And
keep it simple.
Keep it simple as possible, and multiple syllables. Okay. And if you would like to give us a call, remember you can reach us at 512-623-7424, and you will also be entered to win the August drawing. Woohoo! Okay. That concludes the news portion of the show. Please stay tuned for our guest, Sean Cooley, who is the CEO of Mapped, and a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Very. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Very, a leading IoT engineering firm, and I have Bill Flaherty here, who is the hardware practice lead at Very, ready to talk to us. All right, Bill, so I understand that your team has a fairly unique approach to hardware development. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's right, Stacy. Most hardware development practices are decades old, and while software development practices have evolved, hardware is mostly stuck in the 20th or even 19th centuries. Instead of accepting the status quo, we've got a new way of doing things, agile hardware development.
All right, agile hardware development. That sounds interesting, but what does that actually mean?
Well, just like for software, agile hardware focuses on encouraging tight team collaboration, constant interaction with the customer, and being receptive to change, rather than tied to a requirements document. We focus on designing and prototyping small bites of work instead of trying to engineer the whole system all at once. That allows us to iterate quickly, identify issues sooner, and get to market faster.
Excellent. So Very is a 100% remote company. How does that work with hardware development?
We have advanced hardware labs in each engineer's home. That means we can build a prototype for clients quickly and efficiently. We can build, break, and repair hardware on a very rapid cadence.
Oh, so you're breaking hardware on purpose?
Yes. When a large hardware prototype fails after years of development, it can be both financially and emotionally devastating for the team. The difference with Agile is that we're building and breaking hardware early and often. Then we use that feedback to improve the design while the product is still in development. That may sound pricey, but over the long run, it'll save the organization money. It's kind of like the difference between a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage and a balloon mortgage. If you invest in breaking hardware prototypes early and often, you won't have that huge bill come due at the end of the project.
Nice. All right, Bill. Where do I go to learn more about how Very can help me with my IoT project?
You can reach out to us at verypossible.com/Stacy. That's VERY possible.com/STACEY.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Sean Cooley, who is the CEO and co-founder of Mapped. Hello, Sean. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Stacey?
I am excellent. I am super excited to have you on the show this week. We have talked in the past. I've profiled the company. Y'all just raised $9.5 million. And from my end, you know a lot about smart buildings, and people are getting really excited about them, both, I think, from a addressing climate change perspective and a post-pandemic change perspective. So why don't you just kick us off by telling us a little bit about Mapped?
Sure. Yeah, so Mapped is a data infrastructure layer for commercial and industrial IoT. We do discovery, extraction, normalization of data coming out of existing building systems, factory systems, industrial systems, pretty much anything we can get our hands on, whether the data is on-prem or up in the cloud. And we make it available through a API that's built on top of Brick Schema and available to developers through GraphQL.
Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about the Brick Schema and other schemas available, but let's first get people excited about smart buildings. What do you mean when you say a smart building?
Yeah, so when we talk about smart buildings, I think it's less about individual smart systems, and it's becoming more and more about the various systems inside of a building communicating with each other, or communicating in unison to other types of applications that might be doing, some sort of energy analytics or failure detection of various systems, predictive maintenance type activities, or even providing dashboards and analytics into how a space is being utilized. These types of use cases can't really just be done by looking at only HVAC data or only lighting data or only elevator data. You need to start to bring together all of the various data sources inside of the buildings, which nowadays are more than just the IoT systems, also starting to include a lot of IT systems as well. And happy to go into details of all the various systems, but bringing together all those different data sources to make more informed decisions about the space and the use of that space.
And it baffles me because I spend a lot of time talking to people about cool things you can do with sensors. And one of the favorite examples I get is people trying to build smarter conference rooms, which is this idea that, hey, you stick on your calendar program that you're going to have a meeting with X people in the building in this set room. And then when the meeting time comes, maybe those people get a notification, the conference room, the light turns on, maybe a little tablet by the side of the conference room is like, hey, this is reserved. And then the next part of this is when you're actually in the meeting, everything is pretty seamless. It dials the right people. And then towards the end, people want like cool use cases like, hey, 5 minutes before the meeting's scheduled to end, flash the lights so people can get to the point and make sure it's good. So you see a lot of things like that. And then when it comes time to implement them, it is so hard. Even something as simple as like tying your lighting system to the IT system requires like a systems integrator in some cases. So I guess when we start talking about this, how far are we along really? Because I don't think it's as easy as you're making it sound.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I think that example that you just gave, when you start looking through commercial buildings, especially the larger commercial buildings, there's been a decent amount of automation in those buildings for probably the better part of 40 to 50 years now. Sort of late 60s, early 70s is when it started. And, obviously systems have been refreshed along the way and whatnot. But, if we just run through that example that you gave, from a calendaring system, you might have Office 365 or G Suite. From a room booking system, you might have Team. Or any of the 30 other vendors that sort of do room bookings. From a understanding who's within that space, you might have a badge reader on the door. So that badge reader might be from OpenPath or Proxy if it's a newer cloud one. It might be an on-prem badge reader from AMAG or HID or one of the many, many companies that make on-prem badge readers. Then you nowadays might have something from maybe VergeSense or from Density that's counting people as they go in and out of the room. You might have a telepresence unit. You mentioned that it dials out to other people in the conference. That telepresence room unit can be from a Cisco. Maybe it was built by Logitech. Or Neat, these other meeting room systems that exist today. And so when you're trying to figure out, who's going to be in the room, who's actually in the room, which meeting is active inside of the room, the scenario that I just ran through has, easily 4 to 5 vendors involved in the equipment that goes into the space. But from one conference room to another, from one building to another, from one company's building and conference room to another, you're dealing with thousands of possible, permutations of those various vendors and how they come together and make up the systems inside of there. And so if you want to build an application that makes the conference room react and dance and do fun stuff, related to a conference, as a software vendor, you have to deal with these thousands of permutations and, try to make sense of all of them. And that's where the system integrators tend to come in, is that, a system integrator can take a software package that's somewhat genericized and really, customize it per installation. But now you're spending a lot of money doing that custom integration. So, as a software vendor trying to build applications that integrate into these spaces, if you don't have a data integration layer, you're doing all those custom integrations. And so the whole point of trying to build data integration layers is that it abstracts away all that complexity from software developers and allows them to really sort of build things once and run it anywhere.
And as a big transition, we're going to eliminate a whole layer of service providers, it feels like. So if you think about the guys who come out and install and program and, manage your lighting system, and those who manage, again, fire safety, HVAC, all of these people risk, becoming software, basically. They'll install it maybe, or maybe they go into the companies that sell it, and those companies create kind of a new layer of service for people. I'm just thinking about what happens to that entire layer of the building economy.
Yeah, I don't actually see it going away. I view two sort of very clear-cut pieces to this. One of them is the initial installation and commissioning of systems that operate buildings and other, sort of smart or automated spaces. The installation and commissioning, I believe, will continue to be very bespoke. It will require, experts to go in and both physically install, and wire or potentially set up the wireless systems for these environments, and then, do custom programming that makes sense for that, that particular building. The flip side of it is the sort of layer of applications and layer of data science that sits on top of it. And I believe that the system integration efforts on the data science and application side will fade away into standards and data infrastructure layers. But that initial setup, that initial configuration, and really the sort of ongoing maintenance of, the lighting system or the elevator system, those will be around for a very long time and still require experts in the space.
Okay, so let's go to this idea of that infrastructure layer. There are many bespoke systems that you've talked about, but there are also efforts. There's the BRIC Consortium, and then there's Haystack. And there's actually also efforts by companies like Microsoft to create their real estate digital core. So there seems to be a lot going on in this space. How should we think about the different layers people are trying to build here to create interoperability?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, Haystack, pretty much the one that's been around the longest, it is semantic tagging. So very similar to, sort of the hashtags that you see on Twitter. You can go and hashtag data coming out of various systems as, this is a VAV or this is a, rooftop cooling unit. And it allows those applications that then sit on top of and depend on the Haystack data to really, look at the tags and understand, okay, this backnet point is actually a VAV, so I should, interpret the data as such. There's a new version of Haystack coming out, Haystack 4, been in the works for quite a while. And I think it, extends Haystack with a lot of the concepts from BRIC, which, I'll get into in a second. And I think when Haystack 4 comes out, it'll give BRIC a pretty good run for its money. BRIC took that sort of concept of semantic tagging and went quite a bit further in it. It said, in addition to just understanding what an individual device is, right? This is a VAV or this is a rooftop cooling unit. We need to understand the relationships between devices as well. And so it's not just enough to know that this is a VAV. You need to know that this is a VAV that is inside of this room and that it is attached to this particular air handler and that, that it feeds, from this controller. And so those relationships go, quite a bit further in describing the composition of the various components inside of the system. The next one that I think you mentioned, there's DBS from Google. So Google's digital building standard really focuses on sort of the commissioning, post-commissioning of buildings. And how do you verify that after, the humans went in and built and programmed the systems to operate that building, that they did so in a proper form, that the output of that is as expected, and they didn't mix up some of the logic or, reverse some components throughout the system. It obviously also covers some of the same concepts as brick and has actually started to use a bunch of the brick concepts as well. And then the last one, Real Estate Core, which is work between Microsoft and the REC folks, is really Microsoft's digital twin definition language, DTDL, which is what they use for the Azure Digital Twins platform, implementing something very similar to Brick, but in that DTDL form that allows a user of the Azure Digital Twins database inside of Azure to load a schema into the database that is this Real Estate Core format. I think when you look at Google's DBO and Real Estate Core and Brick, they're very, very similar. We are obviously on the side of Brick at the moment, but we'll keep an eye on all the standards as they move forward.
And so I should think of these, if I'm thinking like an OSI stack for buildings, and for the non-networking nerds out there, the OSI stack is it's an IT term that talks about everything from the data packet all the way to what you can do with the data packet, defines those layers. Should we think about some sort of stack for buildings? Because there are obviously like the physical protocols that you've got to deal with. You also have to think about ontologies and semantics. And so how would I think about those layers?
Yeah, I think, the OSI analogy is a good one. We do still deal with down on the sort of physical layer, right? You've got a mix of serial buses, IP networks. Now you're getting, Zigbee and Z-Wave and Bluetooth, and companies like Disruptive Technologies have their own wireless protocol. And so you've got a significant number of sort of physical layers down below. And then above that, you really have like this mix of the next two, which brings you into things like BACnet, Modbus, CAN. In factories, you get into some things like OPC, OPC UA. These protocols then eventually lead to a data layer. I think that our view on this is that what we've sort of seen across the industry was individual physical components and systems that were installed and distributed throughout these environments that were using proprietary protocols and proprietary transports. And, that has now been IP converged by the likes of Cisco and others. And that the next layer really is that data layer, in the same way that it is in the OSI form, but that data layer, as you said, needs to be very prescriptive around the way that things are described, because otherwise you end up with yet another layer that is sort of the wild, wild west in how things get defined and brought together. And the last thing we want is to introduce a new layer in the stack that is yet again custom configured for every location, because now you're back to the requiring system integrators to go in and make sense of that every time.
Okay. And while we're talking some nerdy tech stuff, what are the security implications? Like we see a lot right now, various ransomware attacks hitting people. These networks are designed to be integrated with IT networks for some of the cool use cases. So how should people think about security when they're making their buildings smarter?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of implications around security for this. The issue that we have today in this space is that every vendor who comes into the space brings their own box, sometimes brings their own software. The box and the software tend to have pretty broad access to, parts of the control networks inside of these environments. And yeah, I think the feedback that we get from customers is that the customers don't have a lot of visibility in general into where data goes or who has access to those various boxes and pieces of software that were installed. And so, I think that the importance of a data infrastructure layer is that data infrastructure layer allows you to have, maybe one or two vendors that are responsible for discovering and extracting and moving the data out of the building and up to the cloud. And everybody else can integrate at the cloud level.
Which I believe is what Mapped is trying to be. And thus, you become the potential weak link in this chain then, yes?
That is true. Yeah. And, for that exact reason, we take security very, very seriously. In my background, I spent 18 years at Symantec. A lot of my career has been on the security side of things. And so definitely the first thing we think of when we build anything, from the gateway that we put in all the way up through the cloud, security is top of mind.
Is it top of mind for your clients? I feel like people still are not kind of thinking about this. So
far it has been. I would say it's usually the first or second question that we get asked by every single customer. And the understanding from the customer's perspective, the depth of their understanding of security is significantly higher than we would have seen a decade ago. We get questions about, does our gateway have secure boot? Does it, do we sign firmware images? Are those firmware images validated? What type of remote access do we have to our box? How is the cloud secured? How do we, keep other folks out of it? What kind of monitoring do we have? And I think a lot of these questions are direct results of, prior failures, not specifically in this industry, but just across the board. Folks are just getting smarter about, and they're definitely asking the right questions.
Gosh, those are good questions. I'm glad. It feels like there's a lot more interest in connected buildings. So we talked about reducing the environmental impact and COVID prevention or tracking. How has demand kind of been impacted in the last year or so?
I think that there was a really sort of large realization when everybody stopped coming into the offices that the buildings weren't particularly smart, especially from an energy perspective. What I think a lot of these buildings saw was that nobody came in, but the energy spend stayed exactly the same. I think it got a lot of people's minds running of like, wouldn't it be nice if the building actually reacted to the number of people that are inside of it, and used that to better control and enable or disable the various systems in the building to save energy where possible. And I think that's led to a lot of thought around how do we make the buildings smarter. I think the other one is that ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues are becoming a board level discussion. They're becoming much more prevalent in the real estate space, not just at that board level, but also beyond and into the investors that are really the ones financing a lot of these acquisitions. And because ESG is getting bubbled up so much at such a high level, it is getting a lot more attention around how do you get that data. How do you make better decisions inside of your space, and how do you really control and operate the building in a way that's more sort of environmentally and socially good for all involved? The other one is in that post-COVID. I think that when we look at the sort of four big buckets of what happens in any sort of smart building initiative, it sort of falls into energy optimization, which I just talked about, tenant experience. How do you help the tenants, the actual people inside of the building, find the amenities and other things that they need inside of that building, or report that something's wrong? How do you do predictive maintenance? Again, detecting that a piece of equipment's going to fail before it fails and responding to that. And then the last one is really space optimization. And I think that, partially driven by WeWork over the last couple of years, but space optimization pre-COVID was usually about how do you cram more people into the same amount of space. And you're obviously paying a huge amount per square foot. So if you can get more people in the same amount of space as either the sort of owner operator or the lessee of the space, you can save on your real estate costs. I think post-COVID, that thought process has turned more into how do we keep people away from each other? How do we make sure that people aren't lingering for too long? How do we, flag areas that need cleaning afterwards? How do we exchange more fresh air into a space if it has a lot of people into it? And so, this sort of space optimization category, I think, has gotten a lot more thought and a lot more interest, coming back from the pandemic, emptying of the buildings.
Excellent. All right. Well, Sean, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening, and please subscribe.